Welcome to Dolby Creator Talks. This is a show about how artists use technology to tell their stories, and I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. We are back with more coverage of the 97th Academy Awards, today with musician and composer Daniel Blumberg, who just received his first Oscar nomination for his original score for The Brutalist. Here to speak with him about the music of the film is our returning guest host, music journalist Jon Burlingame. Here's Jon.
Our guest today is the composer of The Brutalist, Brady Corbet's epic tale about a Holocaust survivor who must start his life over as an immigrant to America in the post-war era. The film has no fewer than 10 Oscar nominations, and his original score is among them. Here to talk about it is Daniel Blumberg. Welcome, Daniel.
Hello.
So I understand you and Brady are old friends. Does that mean that you were brought onto the film early?
Yeah, we've been talking to each other about our work since we met, because we instantly connected as friends. We had similar taste in literature and movies and music. So we've always talked about our work to each other. He's someone that I would show records to, while I was working on records, if I wanted an opinion from a friend, Brady would be someone that I'd speak to about something or for his opinion, and sort of vice versa. So as soon as he finished the script, I read it, and we started talking about it.
So did you start writing early? It's my understanding that you were actually there during the shooting, at least at the very beginning.
Yeah, I did some work very early, way before it went into production. Then I was very careful to sort of not read the script again until he'd sort of put the project together, and he was definitely going into pre-production. I knew that as soon as I started, I wouldn't stop until it was, done. So the next time I read it was when he went into pre-production. I went and stayed with him in Budapest, and just before I got there, I read the script again, and then from that point on, it was full time. Every second I was thinking about the film until the sound mix was done.
Is it true that the jazz stuff was recorded right at the beginning, and so therefore you clearly would have had to write that music before shooting, right?
Yeah, so one of the things they do in pre-production is sort of get the schedule together, and he'd talked about shooting certain scenes to music, and then the jazz cue was something we wanted a live band on. I've got really great band. It was this drummer Antonin from Paris, and Joel Grip on double bass from Berlin. He's Swedish, but he lives in Berlin. And then Simon Seeger played piano, who's part of the art ensemble of Chicago. And Pierre Borel played alto saxophone. All people who've played together previously in various formations. I played with Antonin and Joel a lot. So when people have played together, they knew each other, and it was quite quick. And someone like Joel, he's in the film. I spoke to a friend the other day who's a musician, and I said, "Did you see Yoel in the film?" He was playing double bass and screaming, because Brady wanted this sort of very celebratory feeling in that scene originally, before they take loads of drugs.
Right. The jazz sequences are great because I think they sort of help to set the era. We're immediately sort of thrust into the late 1940s, or I guess a little bit later in the 50s.
Yeah, they were definitely. I mean, that the idea of that scene was to evoke the 40s, um, and then also to play through that. They go to the bathroom and take drugs, and then everything gets a bit more abstract. So the musicians that I chose for that were people that I knew could play kind of straightish jazz, but also play into that more abstract um, music that they're all. Most of the people I work with, their main practice is improvised music, whether it's solo or in groups. And um, I also wanted them to play a theme that would later become the construction theme later in the movie. Brady and I had this idea that the character would sort of retain that theme in his head for the whole of his life, basically, after hearing it. And yeah, Yoel and Antonin, for example, play in a band called Ahmed, where they reimagine the music of this double bassist and develop it. And so it was, choosing people who I knew could evoke the era and work with that theme. And then thinking about jazz, Brady needed to the film to suddenly cut to 10 years later in the 50s. And a useful thing, that's where music can be useful, because you can use music to express time developing. And that was a more bebop sort of sound with Axel Dorner, who played trumpet, the sort of main trumpet player on the score, was playing bebop.
You mentioned writing a theme, and I'm wondering, did you figure out early on what the dramatic score would need in terms of Laszlo's journey, or what the film itself was trying to express about the era and the times?
Yeah, those are all considerations that, Brady and I dived into it together. We read the script and went through it, and I'm constantly zooming in and zooming out. So you mentioned, tracking a character's emotional journey, or be it like, those lonely moments where he's with his work, or the moment he's reunited with his wife, and you're bearing in mind those things, and then zooming out to the context of different eras. So when the film goes to the 80s at the end, evoking that. Yeah, and then just generally thinking about the sonic language of the film, like the idea that you can actually create that. Brady's made this story out of nothing, thin air, and you have the opportunity to create something that sounds like the Brutalist. As in the film, not the. But yeah, and then I was reading about Brutalism at the start, thinking about music that could relate to someone who studied at the Bauhaus, or in that context as well. So it's all those elements, and then obviously there's a hugely technical thing of having to, acknowledge what scenes have dialogue heavy, so you don't want to be in the mid-range, the high mids, or those type of things as well. So it's a lot of. I always think of it as, obvious thing to say, but it's like a puzzle, and you've kind of got to start creating the pieces, and then you find out by the end, you found out how to put it all together, hopefully.
I understand Brady wanted to shoot some sequences with music actually playing on the set.
Yeah.
And I was sort of thinking about the beginning of the movie. Could you talk about that and whether or not you had to write a lot of music to be to cover those scenes?
Yeah, the overture. We talked about the beginning being 10 minutes of music, constant music, and things like the credits coming, when the credits with all the actors and everything comes on the screen, it's a nice opportunity to introduce the sort of key players on the record, well, on the score. But he wanted to shoot. Early on, he wanted to shoot the overture, the scene of Laszlo leaving the Holocaust behind and arriving in New York, and the optimism of seeing the Statue of Liberty. He wanted to shoot that to music, so that was one of my first priorities, was to create a demo that would work on set. I had this sample of a piano that I'd prepared in London. It's this sort of percussive, and prepared pianos when you sort of interfere with the strings of the grand piano. So you can put anything on, but screws are quite common. John Cage put screws in between the strings, and that was a sound that felt right. And yeah, I built this demo, and then a few weeks later we were playing it really loud I went to the boat and was watching the monitor, and it was being played really loud on the set. And it was great because the cinematographer could move to the music, and Adrian could move to the music, and the music could cue the extras who were, and so they were responding to the music. And then when I later went to record it, with acoustic instruments, we were responding to the picture. And then the sound mix, the Steve Single, who's doing the sound, he did a pass of the sound mix. He had to build all of the audio from scratch for that piece, because obviously all the demo was going into all the microphones. And then you encounter things like, okay, I'm using he's using low end for the bows of the ship, and then I've got low end from the tuba. And do we want those to interfere with each other? Do we want them to have separation? And those kind of conversations are really, really interesting, because essentially you're working on the picture, you're working on the stereo field together. And then of course, like the narration and the dialogue. But it's not people throwing things out of nowhere from different angles. It's this sort of dialogue between departments, which I think I was hoping would create something really interesting, and I think it was successful in terms of having like an impact for the opening of the film. Yeah,
there's a lot of piano in the score, played by Jon Tilbury. Tell us why you wanted him, and what he played for you.
Yeah, well, piano was when I initially read the script, the two instincts I had were the prepared piano, which I was talking about before, with the sort of acoustic potential of that and how it could expand or contract, depending on how you record it, with different mic arrays and different preparations. It could be a huge percussive sound. But really, when I was reading the first player that I thought of was Tilbury, he's someone that I've always gone to see when he plays in London. Brady and I were really excited that he agreed to work with us, basically. because a lot of the musicians, I mean, someone like that, he's got a whole body of work. He really does what he wants to do. I mean, it's uncompromising music. AMM was a band that he was involved with, he was in, that is quite a very inspiring band to me and people that I work with.
Tell us about recording him. I understand you actually went to his house, and am I right? His piano's in a shed in his garden?
Yeah, it's a studio, but it's not sort of a traditional music studio. It's like it's sort of this extension of this glass extension on the back of his house, with a Steinway in it. Brady and I wanted there to be this sort of presence of an artist in the sound. A lot of the scenes that he's playing solo are when Adrian's on his own and, you know, sketching. There's this cue called Bicycle where he's doing a recce of the town that he wants to, they're building the structure in. So it follows him doing sketching and cycling around the town, doing research. Yeah, with that, I had 2 mics on the piano and then 2 mics in a pair in the room, and then a microphone on him, on Jon. So it's this very intimate recording, and you can hear him. The best is actually to hear it is in the intermission, where you can hear him scribbling on his stave, and you can hear his birds walking on the roof.
So do you cast your musicians like a director would cast his actors? I know that there are a number of musicians on this score that you specifically wanted. Maybe you could tell us about a couple of them and what they brought to the score.
Yeah, so I work with mostly improvisers, so that people who have a lot of with the Brutalist, when I'm thinking about what instruments might work for the sort of sonic world of the film, but then specifically who's playing those instruments. So someone like Axel Dorner, he played trumpet on the score, and he's one of my favorite artists. He's no one plays the trumpet like Axel. And Evan Parker, who played soprano saxophone. Sophie Agnel from Paris, who just plays the strings of the piano. And yeah, there's lots of, Joel Grip. I mean, there's like 19 musicians, I think, in total. And someone like Axel, I'm asking him because of what he does, and he has very peculiar techniques. And so when I work with him, it's about contextualizing the film in the right way so that it's of the piece, but also trying to encourage as much space for him to do what he does. And so a lot of, I have my setup is actually, it's just like Well, it's just here, so I might as well show. This is the recording studio that I recorded 90% of the Brutalist on.
That's fascinating to me. I know that one of the interesting things about this score is that you basically went all over Europe to record many of these specific musicians. And I kept thinking, God, was it a nightmare to put it all together later? But it sounds totally seamless.
Yeah, well, no, it was a big task to put all these elements together. But they were, yeah. I primarily use this, which is a sonosax, and it's really ridiculous how beautiful it sounds because it's so small. But there's 16 channels, and it's battery operated, so it allows me to record in wherever I need to record. So, John Tilbury he's 88, so he doesn't take aeroplanes and stuff, and so I could set up in his studio. Axel, I put all the brass was done in Berlin, based around Axel, but a lot of it was recorded in my friend had a flat there that I was staying in, and hadn't planned. I was using my friend's painting studio to record, and then I was in this flat, and I thought this room sounds really good.
Talk a little bit about Evan Parker, and exactly how you used him in those scenes in the Italian stone quarry.
Yeah, so Evan, I've known Evan for a few years, and he's someone that Brady's a big fan of. And we thought of him for the Carrara sequence. And I set up a recording session with him in Kent. It was after Brady had gone. I didn't join the shoot when they shot in Carrara because it was quite a small group, because it just practically for getting into the quarry and shooting with that massive camera and stuff. But as soon as I saw the images, I wanted to hear what that sounded like, because it's all these big slabs of marble and the surfaces of those bouncing, ricocheting off the sound. I was couldn't imagine what the sound was like. So I went to, I thought, wow, imagine Evan playing in that quarry. But it wasn't possible to go there with him. So I did the session with him in Kent, and I showed him 2 images. I don't work to picture in terms of, I don't play the video and get people to play along. It normally doesn't work great. It's too illustrative a lot of the time. But in this case, I showed him this image of the wider shot of Carrara, where all the marbles sort of these sort of small squares, a bit like pixels. And then I showed him these images of when they sort of go into the misty shots, where the marbles, these huge, heavy slabs. And that was sort of the starting point of, he did these microdynamics. And his circular breathing, which is it's iconic in the way that he plays. And then I went to Carrara and did a reverb, like an impulse response of the quarry. And the way that I did that was, again, I brought the Sonosax and two Sherps, because I use these microphones called Sherps, which they use a lot on film sets to capture the sound on film, but also in classical music. They're very accurate. But yeah, the process for capturing that impulse response is basically you shoot a gun into the quarry, and because it's loud, so you can hear a good echo basically. And then so you record the gunshot, and then you record the response of the space, and then you bring that into a program, and then you remove the gunshot, so it sort of leaves like a hole. It makes an algorithm of the response of the space, and it sort of leaves a hole for you to put something else in. So we put Evans' saxophone in that.
When the film segues to the 1980s for the epilogue, the music changes too. Tell us what we're hearing and how you went about recording it.
He talked a lot about everything to me, including the use of VistaVision and 35 millimeter, and then when it gets to the 80s, it's he's using Betamax, this early digital video, and so I thought, in terms of technology, it's interesting to consider that with the music as well, because all of the score is acoustic until that moment, and I was excited about this moment. It's quite sort of strange at the end, and you're not sure exactly what's happened. You're sort of really brought within the building through torchlight, and I just thought, wow, it would be amazing to hear the first digital sound in the whole after 3 hours and 15 minutes, or however long it is, just suddenly hear this digital sound. And then I was going to cut to Venice, which also has this very amazing light, that city. The idea was that all the themes that you've been hearing acoustically would develop and would suddenly come back as 1980s synth music. Literally the tuba gets overtaken by my Moog. The low end of the Moog, the filter opens up and the sort of tuba dies. And I thought of Vince Clarke to work with for that, who defined the sound of the 80s with, Depeche Mode and Yazoo. So I went to New York to work with him on that, and then took the track back. It was a moment where it was something that Brady wanted to keep the picture open. Even after the picture locked, he wanted to keep it open just till we'd done the music. And the last day of working, one of the last days of working on the music portion, was Brady and I in that room with my Moog and 2 bottles of wine, just like dancing around.
So how much music is there in the film, and how long were you on the project all told?
So I was on from January. I worked sort of with every day on it from January till the following. The sound mix ended in the following April. Yeah, it was, and there was about, I think it was, we delivered 100. I think the actual length of the music we delivered was 100 minutes. like the actual stuff on the score, we had to cut it down to 80 for the final to have 20 minutes aside. And then we could do a huge box set of extra pieces of music as well, because there's a lot of beautiful stuff that Jon did that didn't get on the soundtrack. I've got like a really beautiful 40-minute piece that he was playing that I just couldn't stop him because it was so incredible. I was sitting there just listening to it, thinking, shit, we've got a week or something before we have to get this done, and this is definitely not going to go on the film, but I can't stop it. But yeah.
So for you, will you do more film scores now, or is film just one part of a diverse musical career for you?
As soon as the sound mix finished for Brady's film, I started working on Mona's film. Mona and Brady wrote The Brutalist together, and they write together, and then they wrote a new film which is a musical. So I had to start even earlier on that because I had to write all the music before they went on set. So yeah, that shot in August, September, and now it's in post-production. So that's been quite crazy.
Will we see that this year?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be finished in July on that. So yeah, I think that's going to be finished this year. Otherwise, everyone will get in trouble.
Well, we certainly look forward to it, and we have just so enjoyed experiencing your music and the film, The Brutalist. So, thanks for being with us today, and best of luck to you.
Thank you for doing this about the work.
Many thanks to Daniel for joining us on the podcast today. We wish you the best on Oscar Sunday, March 2nd at the Dolby Theater here in Hollywood. And of course, thanks to Jon Burlingame for conducting yet another excellent interview. And an extra special thanks to our friends at A24 for helping us put this conversation together. Be sure to check out The Brutalist ahead of the Oscars broadcast. It is now playing in theaters, and we will have links, as always, in our show notes. And speaking of awards, if you'd like even more conversations with fellow Academy Award nominees in this category and others, be sure you are subscribed to Dolby Creator Talks. Many of these awards are tough to pick and predict, and we will continue to offer in-depth interviews filled with unique insights into the work of these nominated artists, which might make it a little bit easier for you to fill out your Oscar ballot, whether you are an Academy voter or simply want to do better in your annual Oscar office pool. You can find links to our show on all the major podcasting platforms, including the video version on YouTube, in our show notes. Or you can simply search for Dolby wherever you get your podcasts. If you're curious to know more about what we do at Dolby Creator Lab, head on over to dolbycreatorlab.com. There you'll find information about all of our programs. You can access the entire library of episodes of the show, and you can sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, this is Dolby Creator Talks. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Our producer and editor is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. And our production coordinator is Karen Marroquin. Thanks for joining us.